Anyway, one more thing I'm going to tell you about Norm, because we're going to get it into it later. I told Norm the last time, last year I went to UFO Expo, and well, I'll tell you, got some good information. But anyway, I went to see Norm, and he's not well, and he's had several surgeries, and I expect any day to hear that he's passed away. He's 87, and I said, Norm, I said, I'm thinking that the airplanes that crashed into the World Trade Center were holographs. And he said, John, you're probably right, and here's why. He said, just before I retired, I was driving down on the Bayshore Freeway to Sunnyvale, and he said I had a friend in the right seat of the car, and he says, like it was about 8 o'clock in the morning, maybe 8:15. He said, we're driving south, and we saw this shadow, and we looked up, and here, he says, it wasn't a 747, but it was a huge 4-engine airplane. It wasn't 200 feet above us. And he said, we looked out and looked at this thing, and he said, of course, we're 20 miles from San Jose, and 30 miles from San Francisco. There's no possible way an airplane could, legitimately be flying right there. And he says, we watched it for about 10 seconds, and it went just like you turned a light bulb out. And he said, if that was the contemporary holograph, presentation of a holograph, he says, then you're right. And the holographic technology is so far advanced that people just wouldn't believe it. But the other day I had a lady here that was helping Marilee on a casting program. Actually, she hired Marilee. She was from New York. She had 2 degrees from Harvard. She was just a wonderful, smart, receptive lady. And we were talking about holographs. She says, well, let me tell you. She said, about 5 years ago, I was invited with about 15 other television executives into a private showing in Hollywood, and there was a little auditorium. It wasn't very big. It could seat like maybe 30 people, and the presentation was called The Future of Television. And she said, I don't remember if Steven Spielberg was there, but everybody else was. And she said it was brightly lit, and there was a stage and a podium on the stage, and we're sitting there, and this guy comes out from behind, and he's a kind of East German accent, East European accent, white hair, has glasses, and he comes out and he starts telling us the history of television and how they came up with the first cathode ray tube, and how they did this and how they did that, and he walks down in front of the stage, walks up one of the aisles, he's polishing his glasses, walks back up to the stage, and she says, it was pretty boring. She says after about 20 minutes, he wraps it up with something, and that's the history of television. He puts his glasses on, and just like a light.
He disappeared? He was a hologram?
Yeah. And
wow.
That was 7 years ago. So that's what television is coming to, is you won't have a screen.
Right.
You'll just turn it on, and it'll be happening right there.
It's right there. That's great.
So,
well, that makes sense.
The reason I tell you that
Yellow
story,
Book, they had the Yellow Book, right, from the crash in 1947, apparently. So, and that's substantiated by Dan Birish over and over again. So that's a hologram, technology, right?
So the reason I tell you that is because
they back-engineered it.
On ATS, when I first went there, one of the things they talked about was, there were no planes on 9/11. There was no airplane at Shanksville.
This is really
there was no airplane at
stuff.
Pentagon. There was no airplane at the World Trade Center. And I'm telling you, when I started talking about holographs, the descent, the crush of guys that were out to kill me, it was amazing. There was like 20 guys, and you're nuts, this is absolutely, you're doing a disservice to the 9/11, movement, to find out the truth, You talk about that, nobody's going to be, but the fact was, it was a holograph, and it was CGI, and...
Right, so can you take us through that? Take us through why you think that's true, and how you got, you're a pilot, you certainly have, a vote in whether those planes had the capacity to hit those buildings, because our Henry Deacon has told us some very interesting things also about those planes. Actually, he thinks they were remote controlled. I don't know if that's true, but basically that planes don't have the ability to actually steer into buildings at that level. I mean, I'm not a pilot, so I don't understand the logistics. But how did you come around to this?
Okay, first of all, we're going to talk about Flight 11 and 77 didn't exist in the beginning. The Bureau of Transportation Statistics has no record of them taking off, has no, so let's forget about them because they did not exist. So now we're just talking about 175 and Flight 93. Flight 93 allegedly crashed at Shanksville. Anybody who has any background in accident investigation or any background at all can't possibly believe an airplane crashed. There was no wreckage. It just simply could not happen.
Okay.
As far as 175 into the South Tower, I just recently put in a call to Pan American flight simulator in Miami to see if I could rent a 767-200, which they have. And what I wanted to do was take six candidate pilots. One current and qualified in the 767-200, one maybe qualified but not current, and then one maybe current in a high-speed jet but not the 767, and then the last three the same currency as the alleged hijackers, like a couple hours in an Apache, a private license, maybe a commercial, something like that. And what I would do is in the simulator, you can take them up. That New York is just like it is. I mean, the buildings are there, and I would take them and freeze them in a position 20 miles out at 7,000 feet, at 560 miles an hour, put them in the seat, say, and then give them 2 minutes of looking at the horizons, show them where the World Trade Center is, and say, I'm about to release you. When I do, you'll have 1 minute and 50 seconds to hit dead center. Now, the World Trade Center is 220 feet wide. You got to hit to the center, not left or right, right to the center. And explain how it goes. Then I would have one camera pointing at the pilot and one camera pointing at what he's looking at.
All right.
And then say, go. And say, okay, now show me how easy this is, because all the guys on AT, I did that in Flight Simulator, no problem, It's impossible. At the height of my career, as proficient I was in every kind of airplane, there's no way I could have done that. I mean, it's just too complex. First of all, the airplane can't fly above 560 miles an hour. It can't fly more than 360, which is its velocity max operating. Maybe it could fly maybe 30, 40 miles an hour faster than that, but at VMO, the clacker comes on. The clacker is an FAA-required safety device which clacks loud, click, 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 and it clacks at a rate and a cycle that irritates the pilot so that he can't ignore it. He has to slow down, Now, there's no possibility a hijacker, first time in the airplane, is not only going to, fly it at 390 miles, 400 miles, but do it with that clacker,
right.
And descend and hit that thing center. It can't happen,
I have a question here, if I may. We have a credible witness who says that the planes weren't piloted, but they were remotely controlled, like unmanned vehicles from thousands of miles away. And he said, yes, but I'm asking John to comment on that from the point of view that this also answers the question raised by the fact that no human pilot could have hit that small target.
No airplane crashed in the World Trade Center. First of all, remote controlling an airplane that size or any size is very difficult. And so I don't believe you could remote control an airplane the size of a 767-200 anyway, particularly to hit dead center of the World Trade Center. But the fact is, there was no wreckage from any airplane in the World Trade Center. And by no wreckage, I mean, nothing was found of any size anywhere around. Now, there was a panel of a fuselage that you see with 5 window shades, but when each airplane, American Airlines, the North Tower, and United Airlines, and the South Tower, hit, it was 2/5 of a second while they disappeared into the airplane. So in 2/5 of a second, you're not going to have a panel about 7 feet long drift down, and just be lying there in almost perfect condition unless it was accompanied by Mohammed Atta's passport. The only other thing that was found was the engine on Murray Street, and the engine on Murray Street has been identified as either a CFM 56, CFM stands for Senecma, or the CF6, which was a 767 engine, which was developed out of the CFM 56. But whichever one it was, the CF6 or the CFM 56, it had to be General Electric. And unfortunately, or fortunately, United Airlines used strictly Pratt & Whitney. So that engine that you see flying off, and that engine they say is from 175, isn't from 175 because the guy's whose job was to dump it off there, you know, in a smoking, smoldering thing, dumped off the wrong engine. There was a lot of things that the perps did that were suspect here. You know, the collapse of building number 7 is just absolutely ridiculous.
Right.
And the reason they had to do it that way is because I suspect the holographic projector that projected Flight 175 and Flight 11 somehow became disabled, because Flight 93 was the one that was supposed to crash into Building 7. And when they couldn't do it, they had to do things quickly, make it fake 93 crashing in Shanksville. And I can imagine these guys all day long, what are we going to do? Nobody's going to believe this thing just collapsed, you know, from a little fire. And about 5 o'clock, you know, they said, well, let's go ahead and do it. Maybe no one will notice. So they collapsed this 47-story building, you know, into its footprint, you know, and expect everybody to believe it. And of course they did.